I want to talk about comics. Do you want to talk about comics? You do, you do. You want to talk about comics so bad. You want to talk about comics so bad. You want to listen to me talking about comics so bad. So bad. You want to listen to me talking about comics so bad. So bad. You want to listen to me talking about comics so bad. You do. I swear to God. I love comics and I read quite a lot of comics and I want to talk to you about comics. So you're going to sit there and you're going to listen and then afterwards I might let you out for a little wee on the AstroTurf if you're very quiet and you don't make a peep, okay? Okay, that's also good. Yeah. I want to talk about some comics that I've read recently because I'm running out of time to exploit my university's library and I'm going to have to start paying for the comics I read pretty soon. Or pirating them. I mean, who said that? Who said that? I'm keeping them rolling in as much as I can while the library still lets me borrow like 10 insanely expensive out-of-print obscure comics. Comics are so expensive. So expensive. I keep picking really expensive hobbies. I don't have the money for this kind of collecting habit. I really don't. I've got a stack to look through if you'll join me. But first I want to offer a bit of a background on comics as I see them and as I approach them. Because when I say comic, probably the first thing that comes to mind is the superhero stuff, Marvel, DC, The Walking Dead, maybe Nimona if you're feeling freaky. I don't know, Peanuts, Garfield, comic strips from newspapers. Those are all comics, don't get me wrong, but I'm prepared to bet. I'm going to show you some of these books in a bit and you're going to be thinking, ew, that's not a graphic novel. You wouldn't say it out loud, of course, because you really need that wee and I'm not going to let you outside if it's not fingers on lips, am I? But you could be forgiven for the confusion. The way the big illustrated book trademark has evolved. There's a stark divide between the two categories, with Superman on one side and Persepolis on the other. There's a big gorge down the middle. But if I asked you to tell me what tips something from being just a comic to being a graphic novel, what would you say? What is the difference between a comic strip and like a graphic novel? According to Reddit, which is as much research as I am willing to do, not all comics are graphic novels, but all graphic novels are comics. Cambridge defines a comic as a magazine or book that contains a set of stories told in pictures with a small amount of writing. I suspect Cambridge's effort to mention a small amount of writing intends to differentiate a comic from a graphic novel. But why did that separate category get coined? I don't know if you've seen some of the old X-Men comics. They are wordy. They have a lot of words in them. Small amount of writing, just, I guess maybe it takes up a smaller amount of space on the page, but graphic novels do that too. Why did that separate category get coined? Marketability is that reason. Is to legitimize comics as like a valid literary, intellectual pursuit. Not in the way that superhero comics, where dumb shit happens, are. We're talking about big boy comics. To let ponces and snobs in on the industry without them feeling too embarrassed about reading a book for babies, reading a picture book. So I reject that categorization completely, personally. I don't use the phrase graphic novel ever. I like the word comic. It's dynamic, it's fun. It says what it does on the, it's got history. I think the term graphic novel is the comic book equivalent of calling a toilet a powder room. It's just making a more flowery gesture at exactly the same thing, but saying, and that's why I'm better than you. No, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean? It's a category that was made to appease people that I don't want to be stuck in a room with in real life. I don't know. I don't have time for that. Call a spade a spade. So I call them comic books. There's nothing embarrassing about a comic book. Well, that barrel-chested Captain America cover has a lot to answer for. Rob Liefeld, you will begin to cough in 7 days. I do wonder if he had like a muscle fetish, you know? But the genre is just as worthy without having to tag the word novel on the end. Graphic novel, just anyway. That clarification aside, I want to talk about comics versus comics. Comics with an X. Comics. Which is a differentiation that makes no sense when it's oratory rather than written down. I do appreciate that, so from here on, when I refer to comics with an X, I'm gonna say comics books, but as opposed to comic books. It doesn't sound great, but it's still not a great differentiation, but you're smart, you'll cope. I trust you. Comics books started to encroach on the mainstream during the underground movement in America in the 60s and 70s, launching artists like Gilbert Shelton, Robert Crumb, Trina Robbins, Art Spiegelman, and countless others. The X in comics books means X-rated, which sounds a little raunchy, and they were, don't get me wrong. Do not Google Robert Crumb Bigfoot. Or do. But X-rated also indicated anything that went against the extremely conservative restrictions laid out by the Comics Code Authority. The CCA was a committee formed as an alternative to government regulation of the comic book industry in response to moral panic about exposing kids to, like, violence and obscenity and whatever. So while comics that didn't comply to this Comics Code weren't technically illegal, you did usually need a CCA seal of approval to get published by one of the main publishing houses. So it was an effective censor across the whole mainstream industry of comics. And the big publishing houses didn't stop using the CCA seals until the early 2000s, so it was like a big deal for a long time. There is hours of discussion to be had over the insanity of the Comics Code Authority restrictions, but I'll read you a couple of the original rules that were set out in the first installment of the CCA in 1954. Policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority. No comic magazine shall use the words horror or terror in the title. All lurid, unsavory, gruesome illustrations shall be eliminated. Shall be eliminated! That's crazy. The phrasing is so mad. it's so embarrassing. The police one really gets me, because this was formed as an alternative to government interference, so there was no authority telling them to say you have to be nice to police officers in your comic books. Like, they weren't even actual, like, they weren't the feds. This is like a comic book HOA. So the publishing industry was being choked to death by the CCA. But cartoons are a naturally subversive art form, especially when drawn with an adult audience in mind. They are playful, they're super interactive, and they're accessible. They convey information really well because they use images and text. In the 60s, hippie culture and psychedelics were broadening the American mind to radical concepts such as racial equality and civil rights and not committing war crimes. The Vietnam War was a huge presence, was a huge subject in early comics books. When illustration goes hand in hand with protest material. And what do you do when mainstream publishers and big publishing houses refuse to publish your political cartoons? You found your own publishing house. Comics books were grassroots, self-funded endeavors produced by and for a community that significantly overlapped with stoner, hippie, beatnik culture. So these comics were sold in head shops and became a key vessel for the dissemination of political material. So yes, comics with an X is booby and cock and balls, but it's also radical politics without the filter of having to be acceptable enough to be published by a mainstream publishing house. I beg anyone to read Justin Green's Binky Brown Meets the Holy Virgin Mary. It's available online for free. I'll link it below. And then imagine Justin Green doesn't get diagnosed with OCD for another 20 years after he made that comic. He was writing seminal accounts of compulsions, and he just thought he had, like, Catholic guilt premium. Comics made room for the unsayable. It wasn't a radical progressive utopia, mind you. There's a lot of people who thought they had progressive politics and then in practice had none of the sensitivity necessary to really embody that. Comics books were pretty horrendously misogynistic most of the time, undeniably, like, relishing often in violence and aggression towards women. Because of course the underground presses were all founded by comic book nerds who were too weird to get published by the mainstream publishing houses. So it was a bunch predominantly cishet white guys who considered there being shut out of mainstream publishing enough of a discrimination that they could speak on everybody else's discrimination. This is me not telling you to go and read tons of old school comics books, because they will let you down. They do not hold up to the politics of today. And I would never want to direct people to comics claiming that they are like an invaluable political resource for the now. There are anthologies of queer comics, like No Straight Lines. A couple of major comics books made by and for women were in print at the time, like Trina Robbins's It Ain't Me Babe, and she also was one of the founders of the Women's Comics Collective. And there are some non-white creators who carved out significant niches in the industry, like Larry Fuller and Richard Grass Green, but the predominant output was straight, white and male, and often veered way into the outrageous for the sake of it, for the sake of anti-establishment brownie points. There are a whole bunch of critiques against the underground comics movement, which absolutely do need to be made, and a lot of the establishing literature about comics doesn't address it entirely. I read a collection called, I think it was just called Underground Comics. I'll look it up. And there was a single essay in this book by Trina Robbins that addressed that. The tone of it was so different from everything else, because everybody else was going, oh yeah, we had a great time, and Trina Robbins is like, it was so misogynistic, it was so difficult to carve out a niche. I still feel like we haven't done enough work, blah 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 blah. And then the rest of the book is just like, oh well, here's the original draft of this famous comic. Yeah, it's really, really racist, just don't pay attention to that. Even so, I like using the comics movement as a framework to imagine how we might create positive change in the landscape of today. Taking the good from that time and working out how to remove the bad gives us an idea of how comics can be used as like a tool of radical movement. I want to highlight right now specifically the legacy that the comics movement left on the comic industry and how that sort of manifests today, because I would argue that what we understand graphic novels to be was way more derived from comics books than comic books. It's often argued, I've read some disagreements between whether it was Will Eisner's work that created the term graphic novel or Art Spiegelman's work that created the term graphic novel. Either way, Mouse as a comic changed the perception of comics in the public eye. And then it started getting called a graphic novel. It won a Pulitzer. It was a huge deal for the industry. It was a huge publishing moment. It sold crazy fucking numbers of copies. And Art Spiegelman came up in the comics books. I hate having to say that. Art Spiegelman came from the comics books movement. Came from the underground. Let's call it the underground movement. Art Spiegelman came from the underground movement. He has specifically mentioned that had it not been for Binky Brown and Justin Green, Mouse would never have been written. In that huge moment in comic history, in graphic novel history, the founding, arguably, of the graphic novel came from the comics movement, came from the underground movement. All this to say, can you tell this is like a special interest for me? I really care about comics, and I want you to care about comics, and I want more people to know that there is more to comics than Batman and Heartstopper. Both of those are good. I thought Heartstopper was lovely when I first read it. I still read YA comics, and I'm trying to get into X-Men right now. I like all aspects of the comic industry, but my specialism is alternative comics. So this is merely an invitation to the road less traveled. What are we looking at when we talk alternative comics in the now? There are some bigger publishers that pick up more off the beaten track titles like Fantagraphics or Drawn and Quarterly, and there's also a bunch of smaller publishing houses that are doing amazing stuff. If I see a Silver Sprocket logo on anything, I'm buying it on the spot. I don't care how much. If I see Breakdown Press under the barcode on the back of a comic book, it's coming to my house. And that's not even getting into webtoons and webcomics. I haven't really got into webcomics yet. That's something I want to explore more in the future. But I found Leo Fox through Instagram before, I'm fairly sure, Silver Sprocket ever published his work. And now I'm a disciple for life. So the world is your oyster. There's so much great comic art being drawn right now. Independent comic shops are great places to find new weird stuff. If you're in London, Gosh Comics is a place of worship. Charing Cross Foils has a pretty big graphic novel section, and the Waterstones in Trafalgar Square, only 2 bays, but a surprisingly good collection. So there's plenty of places to get digging. I think organic discovery of comics is the most fun. All of the comic artists I'm most influenced by today I found by going to my uni library and just picking random stuff off the shelf. And genuinely, some of these comics have changed my life. Changed the trajectory of my life. I make comics now. They're not very good, but okay. Enough yapping, though really I could talk about alt comics and the way they relate to current politics all day, all day. Let's get to the pile. Let's get to talking about the comics. I also want to preface that there's gonna be manga in this stack as well. I call it comics, sorry, that might be sacrilegious, but it's pictures in a row with some words. That's a comic to me. I'm just nasty like that. I'm not super well read in manga. I've read a bunch of Junji Ito and pretty much nothing else. I read My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness and that was beautiful. But I'm trying to fix that. So, speaking of, alrighty, let's get the show on the road. First, I want to talk current reads, because there's one in this pile. Garden by Yuichi Yokoyama. I am trying to get into Yokoyama. Well, I say trying. I'm doing pretty well at it. I've read a few of his now. I've been really into the artist Joe Kessler, who has 2 titles in the stack next to me. I read an interview between him and Dash Shaw, who is also going to feature very heavily in this, and they talked about Yokoyama and the comics that Yokoyama have done that influenced their work, and I thought, these 2 artists are some of the biggest artistic influences in my life right now. I should be reading Yokoyama. And yeah, they were right, I should be reading Yokoyama. I'm in the middle of Garden right now, and it is absolutely fascinating, but I also read Outdoors. These are all library loans, by the way. I got these from my library. And I read, it was World Map Room by Yokoyama. So these 2 comics really established a vibe that is continuing, but to a ridiculous degree in this one. Outdoors was by far my favourite. One of the things that I really, really like seeing in art and literature is the mundane made fantastical. I love the idea of everyday life being bizarre. Because if you think about anything for more than 2 seconds, you're like, is anybody else seeing this? I was actually talking about this today with one of my friends. If you look at a cigarette butt on the ground, where did the paper come from? Where did the filter come from? Who lit this cigarette? Why did they discard it on the street instead of putting it in a bin? There's layers of understanding to it that also contains their DNA. My friend was telling me about like this art exhibition where an artist collected DNA off of cigarette butts and then printed a 3D face based on that DNA. There's hundreds of those on the pavement, like outside, and you can extract that much information about a person out of a single cigarette butt. It's one of the, like, is anybody else seeing this? Isn't this fucking crazy? And that is exactly what Outdoors by Yokoyama does. It follows sort of his signature, which is a bunch of strange looking dudes. They're designed to almost look like aliens. There's no dialogue in this comic to my recollection. It's like an anthology around a similar theme, but the longest one from that collection follows these strange alien dudes walking through a field. They start to feel a few drops of rain, and then they get into this field, and they start to enter what look like random agricultural paraphernalia. One of them climbs into a hay bale, and it turns out on the inside to be something resembling a spaceship, but operates more like a bird shy. They sit in there, and a little window opens, and they just watch the rain fall. And one of the other features of Yokoyama's work is that he draws characters that indicate sound really prominently in his panels in a way that resembles a pattern almost more than words. And Outdoors, especially that rain one, some of the words take up a whole panel. It's all about the noise the rain makes, and it's a 90-page comic, and it's just these little alien people watching the rain and listening to the sounds. Absolute cinema. I loved Outdoors. World Map Room is a slightly different thing. Similarly designed alien dudes go to a new city, they've never been there before. They're instinctively distrustful of everything and everyone around them, and the same goes in reverse. they get on a boat, they go to this observatory secret base place, they talk to the people there, and then the comic ends. And you never find out what they were doing in this city, what they were waiting for, whether they were picking something up, whether they were delivering information, whether they were beginning some sort of secret mission. You never get any closure. But it's just like, there's something really charming about the complete sense of confusion that these comics create. And Garden, so far, and I think for the rest of the comic as well, this is a long one, this is like a 300-something pager, follows a group of these alien people in quantities from anywhere from like 10 to about 200. The number seems to change depending on how big the panel is and how many people he needs to draw to fill it. And you get these, I'm trying to find like a page with faces big enough for you to see what I'm talking about when I talk about these strange alien people. I don't know, they're just all really funny looking. They break into a garden that's just closed, but the guy at the front of the group is like, no, this garden's really cool, we gotta go see it, you just gotta get to it first. And they travel through these environments which emulate natural forms but are completely alien, possibly man-made, because they're all mechanical, they're all machines. Things move, there's tons of balls everywhere. They have to move the balls to traverse the landscape, and they keep saying, oh, it's gonna be so obvious that we came through here, but they don't turn back. They go so far, I'm only halfway through this, they go so far into this like alien landscape that you're thinking, how are they ever gonna get out of here? And I doubt they do. So I'm really enjoying this. I've got another Yokoyama in the TBR pile that's coming afterwards, but I've talked enough about this guy, so I'm gonna put that down. Next we're getting to Joe Kessler. This is another library loan from a different library. It is so hard to get a hold of this comic. This is Window Pane by Joe Kessler. This is a 4-story anthology following various characters going through strange sort of alienations from their everyday life and trying to navigate that as best they can. This is about interpersonal drama, this is about entering the unknown, this is about wandering into the night. There's all sorts going on in here that sort of defies any one easy description, but the main feature of these comics is Joe Kessler's visual technique. I love this shit, it's so good. I genuinely might email him to ask him what his process is, because he uses 4 colours, and it looks all sort of traditionally illustrated, but maybe some of it's digitally coloured. I don't understand how any of it works, but I'm just in awe. It's so beautiful, so stylish. There's something about this colour palette that is so emotive. I just love it. I just love everything about this, from the paper quality to the way the stories unfold and link into each other, from the absolutely bizarre visual techniques that Joe Kessler uses. Obsessed. But this one was like a 4-star, because I don't think the plot was as strong as this next one, which is The Gull Yetin by Joe Kessler. Now this you really see the influence of Yokoyama, because there is no dialogue in this. I think the only words in this whole comic is like in one panel where there's a sign that's written down, and this comic follows a little boy whose house burns down. This creature that we never get a name for, but I have been referring to as the Gull Yetin, because what does that mean? He's like this bird guy, strange distended bird man, and he sort of scoops up the little boy and takes him on a boat. And these, I just want to talk about these ocean travel panels for a second, because there's watercolour washes as the background of the panel. I will never shut the fuck up about this comic. I think the Gull Yetin is so... Hello? Is anybody else seeing this? What the fuck? I found this at the Trafalgar Square Waterstones. What is the Waterstones in Trafalgar Square doing with something this fucking weird? This is a Gosh Comics title, guys. I sound like such a... You gotta be fucking kidding me. Joe Kessler specifically mentions that he wanted to leave it ambiguous as to whether the girl Yetin is a positive or negative figure. In fact, I didn't notice it on my first read through of this comic, but I read an interview he did where he mentions that it could be inferred that the gull Yetin is the one that sets fire to the house. I didn't even think about that. I didn't pick that up at all. He does various shenanigans. I love, oh my god, come on. I thought this was so beautiful. And it's an improvement on Windowpin. I think Windowpin is really good, and I like the stories a lot, but this has an emotive quality, allowed in part to it by the fact that there's no dialogue, that I found really touching. This holds like a special place in my heart. I mean, I bought a copy for myself. There's something so tender about Joe Kessler's arts approach that the dialogueless format and his page layouts really let sing. I think this is a magnum opus comic book. I don't know how he's going to improve from here. I would read this guy's toilet paper. Like tea leaves. So that's another one that I've read recently, and I'm going to be reading this regularly for ever. I just keep picking it up and reading a little passage and thinking, huh? Huh? Is anybody else seeing this? Okay, next, not quite as sensational, but I wasn't expecting this to be, so I'm fine with that. This is Cosplayers by Dash Shaw. Dash Shaw was the comic book artist that blew my mind open. A few years ago I read Dash Shaw's Body World, just because I picked it off the shelf at my uni library because I thought the shape of it looked weird, and I was sat there like this. I could not get over how unlike anything else I'd ever read Body World was. I still want to buy a copy of that to keep for myself because I think about Body World all the time. I think the plot-wise it's not even that great, but it was the comic that triggered my understanding that like the world, the potential of comics is so much vaster than most mainstream publications will ever indicate. So I've been slowly making my way through the Dash Shaw backlog, which of course involved me getting my hands on Cosplayers because this is one of his first titles. I think this was published in 2014. It's not great, it's not terrible, but especially compared with his later work, the colours are pretty drab. The one thing I really like about this comic is there's like collage pages featuring the characters in cosplay that I think are really, really fun. I love, where's the Wolverine one? That's the only one that's important to me, really. This collage of a guy dressed as the Wolverine with a big pink lipstick in the background. Love! That made it worth it for me, because I had to buy this on eBay from an indie bookshop like across the country. So I paid full price and shipping for this. It's fun. I don't think it's great. It follows two girls who make movies where they cosplay, but the movies are like them trying to cosplay real life things. So they make movies where one of them goes up to someone's apartment and goes, "We got a package for you," and they're like, "I didn't order anything." She's like, "Well, it's addressed to you," and she's cosplaying a delivery driver. So there is like a really fun element there that you see whisperings of the really interesting things that Dash Shaw can do with plot and narrative, but this is a very okay comic. Still better than Ghost World. Next. Okay, this one is an indulgence. I read this at my uni library again, and I wasn't gonna buy a copy because it's fucking massive. I can't stress enough how heavy this comic is, and when I hold it up to the camera you're gonna be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What? It's so fucking large. There's no page count on this edition as well. I'm fairly sure it's like 600 pages long. It is Bottomless Belly Button by Dash Shaw, which follows a dysfunctional family getting together for Christmas for the first time in a long time. There's 3 generations of this family. There's the mother and father who are elderly by this point. They're in their like 70s maybe. The kids, I think there's 3 children, and one of them has a young teenage daughter. They get together at the grandparents' house for the first time in a long time, and you basically spend 600 pages watching their minute interpersonal differences play out on the page. I thought this was so great. The long form of this comic really gives space for these characters to expand on the page in a way that you get in novels, but it's much harder to create awkward silences in a novel. In a comic, you can put 3 panels of 2 characters looking at each other like this, and then a dialogue bubble, and you're sitting there like reading it like this. I love this. I've read it. I just bought a copy. I caved. I used my discount at work and I got it for like a tenner, so I think it's really great. I think everybody should read Bottomless Belly Button, and you might hate it, and that's fair. Next up we have Influencer by Jade LFT Peters. I thought this was so great. I literally just ordered this because it appeared in the Readers Also Enjoyed tab on Goodreads for a comic I was logging, and then I realised that it was published by Silver Sprocket. I thought this was so fun. I mainly bought a copy because I love the illustration style. I want to know what brush setting this person uses on whatever application they use so bad. There's something about like the blobby line quality that I think is so beautiful. It's like a little bit jittery. This is raunchy as hell, first of all. It follows a few characters in the years following the zombie apocalypse. So this character called Dodie becomes like a like a zombie slayer influencer because she's hot and sexy and buff, and she does these PSAs where she's like, this is how you kill a zombie, this is how you stay safe from zombies, this is how you get rid of zombies, and everybody falls in love with her. And her girlfriend Beatrice is the camera woman on this operation. And it's not super big, it's really fun, it's slice of life, it follows them living domestically in the aftermath of the apocalypse, basically. I thought this was really sweet. I would recommend. I liked it a lot. I got 4 minutes of storage left on my camera. Next up, Holy Lacrimony by Michael DeForge. I will never shut up about Michael DeForge. I think Michael DeForge is so good. I really like this comic. This follows Jackie, who is abducted by aliens. These aliens announce to Jackie that he's been abducted because he is, by their metric, the saddest person on Earth. And this alien race is unable to feel sadness, so they want to study him. No notes. I thought it was great. I rated this a bit lower than I might have because I loved the passages where he's been abducted by the aliens. I love the time he spends on the spaceship, and then he comes back to Earth at like the 70-page mark, and it never quite picks up the same momentum. Maybe I've got to read it a couple more times before I fully understand what was being done and said there, but I just didn't feel, I felt like it lost a lot of momentum. But Michael DeForge's art is stellar. I just love the strange distended nature of his characters. I just love these panels. Oh, I don't know. I love Michael DeForge. That is my red pile. Some of these are library loans, most of these I own, to be honest. I don't really have the space for them, but sorry. I like a comic. Sue me, sue me. Oh, sue me, sue me. Okay, let me grab the TBR. We've got a lot of books by the same people, just different vibes and stuff like that. Since we left off on the red pile with Michael DeForge, let's start off the TBR with Michael DeForge. I've got Heaven No Hell. I've read really good reviews of this, and I've had it for a while and just haven't got round to it because I know it's an anthology, and I really like taking my time with the plot with Michael DeForge's books. I read Birds of Maine a few weeks ago, and it took me a few days to properly like get into. I love Michael DeForge's characterization so much, and I find myself drawn more to his long form comics than I am to the shorter ones. So I think I've been putting this off because I just want like another 800 pager from Michael DeForge. Not another, but I think Birds of Maine was like 470 pages or so. And I just want another one of those from Michael DeForge. Obviously that's not coming anytime soon. But this being a short story collection, I know they're going to be good, but want to sink my teeth into some Michael DeForge characters. I read his comic Leaving Richard's Valley a while ago as well. That one I didn't like quite so much because I like Michael DeForge's colours so much. Like, this is so lush. I love his colours so much that reading a Michael DeForge that was just black and white was a bit jarring to me, to be honest. But the characters in Leaving Richard's Valley were so endearing. Imagine my shock when, upon reaching the end of the book, I realised that my favourite character was Caroline Frog. Didn't see that coming from the beginning, and yet Michael DeForge shocks and pleases. I've been putting this one off for a while, but I will get around to it, and I'm gonna love it. I don't know. I got shit to do, whatever. So that one is on the TBR. This one, still got the library reservation slip in it, is social fiction by Chantal Montelier. I have no idea what this is about, but I saw it in an Oxfam bookshop for £15, and to convince myself not to buy it, I borrowed it from the library and I've had it ever since. Let me read you the synopsis. Dark, smart, and indomitably cool, the 70s and 80s dystopian visions of Chantal Montelier still unsettle. Visitors to an underground mall must recreate civilization after a nuclear strike may have wiped out the rest of humanity. Newlyweds find themselves implicated in a government eugenics program. Disembodied authority reprimands a man for stepping out of view of a security camera. Collected in English for the first time, these three novellas, okay, embody the best of Montelier's withering gripping storytelling. Withering humour. Not withering human. Gripping storytelling and ruthless critiques of totalitarianism. I thought the synopsis sounded great in the shop, but I was like, I can't justify spending £15 on a second-hand comic that I don't even know the artist of. But this looks really good. Maybe I should have bought it. Oh well, it's a library loan. I'm excited to get to that one at some point. Next, we have another Silver Sprocket title called Putty Pygmalion. Now, I was really excited about this because this is a multimedia comic. A lot of the background images in this are images with a bunch of Photoshop filters on them. That sounds like a dig, but I want to make stuff like this so bad. I think it's so beautiful. I love... Ah! It's like a Pygmalion retelling where a character makes a little dude out of clay. That is my understanding. Daryl, a lonely radish, creates a custom boyfriend out of a defunct and illegal children's product. His creation, Peter, finds a suffocatingly cloistered existence catering to Daryl's needs. When Peter sneaks out one night and meets Daryl's friends, he discovers there's even more to his creator's intentions than he thought. I'm so excited to get around to this. And it's going to be like a quick read and then one I revisit all the time. I can just sense it. Very excited to read that one. Oh, that one's by Lonnie Garcia, I should say. I just read the title and not the author for that one. My bad. Next. What is it? Discipline by Dash Shaw. This is one of the few Dash Shaws I have now not read. I was really intrigued by this because it's been out of print for a little while and I was waiting on them reprinting it, and eventually I was like, no, I should just buy a copy. What the hell is wrong with me? Dash Shaw's style changes pretty much from comic to comic, which is why I enjoy his work so much. But this looks most like his work from his most recent publication, which was Blurry. I didn't like Blurry when I first read it because I wanted something as abstract as New School, which I'd recently read. And going up to New School and then back down in abstraction to Blurry was a bit jarring to me. But then I thought about it and then I reread Blurry and I thought, no, this is really, really good. His ability to like create bizarre narratives is so, I just love it. So this one, certainly not in a traditional comic format. There's no borders to the panels, which is really interesting. I don't know anything about this one. Oh, it's set in the Civil War? Fucking hell. I mean, I could have guessed by the costuming, but like Dash Shaw would make them like reenactors maybe, I don't know. During the Civil War, many Quakers were caught between their fervent support of abolition, their desire to preserve the Union, and their long-standing commitment to pacifism. In Dash Shaw's Discipline, Charles Cox, a young Indiana Quaker, slips out early one morning to enlist in the Union Army, scandalizing his family and community. Far from home and on the front line, Cox is confronted with the savagery of battle and the cruelty both of the enemy and his fellow soldiers. He clings to his faith and his family through letters with his sister Fanny, who faces her own trials, betrayal, death, and a church that seems ready to fracture. Combining modern graphic storytelling with art that echoes the Civil War-era illustrations of Thomas Nast and Winslow Homer, Discipline is an American comics masterpiece that serves as a powerful consideration of faith, justice, and violence. Dash Shaw was raised as Quaker. I did not know that. Wow. That's gonna be interesting. I also just love this cover. I think that's beautiful. And the format's really lovely. It's got a really nice texture to it. And I love a little tactile experience for the book. Okay, 2 more. My camera's on 1 blip of battery, please, please. Travel by Yuichi Yokoyama. This is the other Yokoyama that I've borrowed that I haven't read yet. The other 2 I read at the library so I could return them immediately because they were so heavy. So I took this one and Garden home with me. Travel is the one that Dash Shaw and Joe Kessler both said were the most influential to them, and this one is another completely dialogueless comic. The illustrations in this look even more dynamic than that of Garden, which is really exciting. I love, wow. Love this man. So I'm really excited to get around to that one. That's probably next on my list right now. I want to finish all the Yokoyama before I go anywhere. I would give you a synopsis of this, but it's gonna be, there's no synopsis in the book, so I don't know what this is gonna be about. I'm going in completely blind, and I'm very excited to do so. Finally, I have 1 comic here, and but I have the full collection, which I think is about 12 volumes, which is Fuff by Jeffrey Lewis, and you might notice not a flex or anything, but it is signed. Just saying. I went to a screening of his documentary in London and he was there. Wasn't expecting him to be there until on the day. I knew he drew comics, but until I went to the merch table that he'd set up, I had no idea how many comics he'd published, and these are really like, the density of these pages is so reminiscent of the original comics with an X comics books. You can see so clearly the influence that era of comics has had on him in a really fun way, but probably, I hope, without the crazy prejudices that OG comics come with. So I've got this, which is volume 10, and the rest of the volumes, because I bought a job lot off his website. It cost me like £60 because I had to pay international shipping as well, and it took like a month to arrive, but now I have them. Ooh. That's quite saucy. Goodness me. I have no idea what these are about. I think they're autobiographical, to be honest. I have no clue though. That's the, you know, that's the beauty of going in completely blind to someone's weirdly personal comics. So, this is genuinely so fucking heavy. That is my current input. That's my current setup. Christ. I love comics. I want you to love comics. I want you to read as many comics as you can. I want you to pirate them on the internet. Who said that? I want you to borrow them from the library. Tons of the OG comics. I will say Binky Brown and the whole Binky Brown collection is available online. And those are minimally problematic compared to Justin Green's contemporaries, so if you fancy reading some comics, I'm saying Binky Brown is right there. And Kim Deitch is pretty fun, and there's, who am I thinking of? Alison Bechdel started in the comics community because obviously their comics couldn't be published traditionally because they're all about lesbians. I don't know why I'm talking about that now. I'm trying to wrap this up. Thank you so much if for some reason you are you've sat this all the way through. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to talk about comics, and hopefully next time I check in I will have finished some of these and I'll be able to give you my thoughts. I'd like to do like a little wrap up of all the comics I'm reading at the moment because I'm going through them at a rate of knots because I'm so terrified about losing my library card. I don't know how to end this. Do you like this mug? Isn't it so cool? Ooh, what the I just splashed water everywhere. I don't even know how that happened. I guess I reached a velocity with it. Oh. Also, check this out. I was clearing off my desk earlier, and I uncovered a set of keys to my house that I've been looking for a full year. So I'm keeping it in this rat-shaped candle holder now, so that I don't lose it again. Anyway, that's it. Thank you. Please mail interesting things that you find on the side of the road to my house, please. That's the easiest way to show me support. I'm not gonna give you my address. That would, I don't want you to come here. I just want you to, I don't know, leave stuff around the place and I'll find it. Okay. Bye.